9. Chain Gang Song. Node 1. There was no sensory input, but there was a sensation of movement. The doctor felt himself marooned in space of infinite complexity. He realized instantly that he was in danger of disassociating, flying apart down all the logical pathways of probability. I am what I am what I am, he thought fiercely, and felt a part of himself detach and go spinning down an alternative pathway. He got a glimpse of himself as he went. He had outsized forearms with anchor tattoos and a pipe. Stop, thought the doctor, and the sensation of movement ceased. What he needed was a frame of reference, a hook to hang his hat on. It took a while, but soon he had constructed a sphere around himself, which he called Node 1. The inside of the sphere was dotted with recessed roundels, scaled-up duplicates of the ones in the TARDIS. Each one represented a possible pathway that led from the node. He colour-coded the roundels, black for those pathways he'd already traversed, blue for Popeye the Sailor's route, red for the rest. He spun a web across the roundel he had come through. It would transfer his frame of reference to anybody following after him. Fred was somewhere in the system ahead, an intelligence operating within its own environment. It wasn't going to be easy to defeat. And first, he had to find it. He could hear the Popeye subset of himself in the distance, his little ditty echoing through the pathways. By concentrating, he could trace the subset's path through the system. The doctor created a map in the air to make it easier to visualize. The trace created a meandering pattern to what the doctor decided to call the west. He called the direction he had come from the south. He didn't have to, but he liked to keep things simple. The Popeye subset suddenly ceased to exist. Was that Fred, wondered the doctor, or did the system contain predators of its own? Find Bernice. The doctor reached into his mind and pulled out Bernice's memories. He sifted through them, looking for something strong and emotional. There. It was a simple child's doll, but it practically stank of guilt. He looked into his own memories for something that could track her, but rejected the cheetah people. The doctor suspected that his memory was too accurate for the cheetah people to be reliable. Instead, he came up with a lugubrious-looking bloodhound. Fusing the bloodhound with the doll created an inelegant mess, but it would probably get the job done. He created a baker's dozen and sent them bounding out through random pathways. He watched them fan out on the map, ricocheting from node to node. The ones going roughly east and west spread out into the distance, their traces getting fainter the further they went. The ones going north seemed to have locked on to something, but kept bouncing off an invisible wall. Their repeated attempts to cross this wall built up a picture on the map, a semicircular line that divided off most of the north. The doctor chose a north-facing roundel and floated through. As he crossed the threshold, he felt a strange sensation of separation, as if he had left something intangible behind. Quick mental inventory found nothing missing. The doctor pressed on. He didn't have time for introspection. Node 1. There was an unpleasant sensation, like a ghostly caress, as if she had walked through a spider web. Then she floated free inside the first node. There was a laminated card in her hand, identical to the instructions that had come with the pressure suit on Mars. The letters at the top of the card blurred briefly and became her name. Dear Kadiatu, she read, you are now entering a world of sensory illusion. In practical terms, you have just become a very complex piece of software that happens to think it's a person called, the blurring effect again, Kadiatu. Don't ask me what happened to your physical body. I haven't got the faintest idea. I have provided a frame of reference with which I hope you will feel comfortable. Think of it as a front-end interface. It should allow you to move around. Try not to get attenuated, and be careful. This is the most dangerous place you have ever been. The card dissolved between her fingers. There was a hissing sound above her. A hat stand floated horizontally above her and to the right. A cat, was perched precariously at its middle. It was a large animal, 1/2 metre long, with glistening silver fur as if it had been dipped in mercury. Its eyes were slanted shards of refracted light. The cat hissed at Kadiatu again, showing sharp white canines. Bands of green formed around its shoulders and rippled down its body until they formed a ring at the end of the cat's tail. Kadiatu bared her teeth and hissed back. The cat recoiled. It had obviously not been expecting that response. Its ears flattened and the tail twitched from side to side. "Such a small cat," said Kadiatu. "Where I come from, the cats are as large as men and as fierce as tigers. They assume the form of women and walk the paths of the forest in search of prey." The cat yawned, feigning indifference. "Well, little sister," said Kadiatu, "do you belong to the doctor?" The cat stiffened, its eyes blazing with green light. "I am my own cat," the eyes seemed to say. "I belong to no man." "Well then, little sister, shall we hunt him anyway?" Kadiatu asked the cat. The cat wiped its face with a paw, considering. "Perhaps not," said Kadiatu. "Perhaps you should leave this to me." The cat stopped its wash and stared at her. Green and silver chased themselves over its fur. With a light, confident movement, it jumped onto Kadiatu's shoulder, twisted around, and made itself comfortable. Its purr was loud and comforting in Kadiatu's ear. There were many red roundels, fewer blue, and only one black. "Well, little sister," said Kadiatu, "shall we dance?" Node 2021. The attack came from nowhere. The doctor got the impression of animal fur, lithe speed and ferocity, like a greyhound crossed with a yeti, thought the doctor. And of course, that's what it was. Ragged brown fur pulled tight over starvation ribs, lean, elongated limbs tipped with 3-fingered claws. Red eyes blazed over a sharpened dog's snout, a pink tongue lolled out between yellow teeth. The doctor made a mental note to keep his imagination under restraint. The mental note popped into the air between the greyhound yeti and him. An Alexandrian scroll fluttering down in the imaginary gravity, blue tie ribbons streaming behind. The greyhound yeti snapped at it, and the doctor used the distraction to leap through the closest roundel. Once in the next node, he imagined a huge vault door slamming shut on the pathway. He locked it tight with memories of Fort Knox, the Bank of England during the 19th century, and the Great Seal of Rassilon in the Panopticon. A random predator, decided the doctor. That's why it appeared in my frame of reference as an animal. He was going to need some kind of advanced guard to prevent another ambush, and something to guard his back. The doctor thought long, hard, and carefully about it. The result was a group of yard-high figures in black bomber jackets and ponytails. They carried little silver deodorant cans and careened around the node with irritating exuberance. They also made a lot of noise, yelling nonsense in high-pitched voices. He wondered what he should call them in the multiple. A brace of aces? A confusion? One hurtled past his head and ricocheted off the side of the node. An explosion, he decided. An explosion of aces. He decided to move on before things could get out of hand. Node 20. She stretched, enjoying the rich luxury of the movement, the pull of her muscles against anchoring bone, the silk feeling of being wrapped in her own skin. The silver cat had returned to its place on her shoulder and was now batting idly at a scrap of fur as it drifted past. Other pieces of the monster floated in the node, a severed limb twisted close by Kadiatu's face. She watched it rapidly decompose, the structure breaking down particle by particle, like a slow derez on a hologram. The monster had been trying to break through a locked roundel when Kadiatu entered the node. She had jumped on its back and torn it to bits with her bare hands and teeth. She felt enormously better now. The trail of the doctor led through the locked roundel. "What shall we do now, little sister?" she asked the cat. If one pathway was blocked, then she would just have to try another. As she considered her options, She licked her lips, running her tongue over sharp white canines. The cat's purr was loud in her ears. Node 36, the border. The Minister for Primary Colours was waiting for the doctor at the boundary. The Minister appeared as an iridescent shimmer at the north end of the node. The doctor's frame of reference should have translated the Minister into something more recognisable. Compatibility problems, deduced the doctor. He made a brief attempt to resolve the Minister into a human figure, but gave up when he encountered escalating resistance. The Minister was flanked by a personal guard of fearsome Reds. The doctor's explosion of aces bounced about the node, but generally behaved themselves by staying behind him. The Reds hung in the air as sheets of solid colour, dangerous in their stillness. When the Minister spoke, it was with a sound like wind chimes. "I am the Minister for Primary Colours," said the Minister. "I am the Doctor," said the Doctor, "and these are my aces." "What is your function in coming here?" asked the Minister. "I am searching for a utility called Fred." "This utility is registered with me," said the Minister. "It is held in the directory of the monarch. Why do you seek it?" "The utility called Fred has bootlegged the program that belongs to me. I wish it returned." "This is a matter that is out of my purview. You must take this matter before the monarch," said the Minister. "But be warned that the utility Fred is held in high esteem by His Majesty, who ranks him above all other programs in his directory." "Nonetheless," said the Doctor, "I will take my suit to the monarch." "Attend," said the Minister of Primary Colours. "These are the access protocols. You must divest yourself of all offensive programs, and the colours red, blue, and ultramarine. Are these protocols acceptable?" "No," said the Doctor, "but I shall abide by them. A moment as I prepare." The Doctor thought jazz and back beyond jazz, stripping away the European influence, the instruments of varnished wood and cunning artifice, back across the cramped and reckoning ocean to where the forest met the sea, back to the drums, the human voice, and the dance. Dance for joy, for sadness, for funeral, harvest, wedding, and childbirth. Lovers' dance, young feet stamping down on the dust. Children's dance, old men's dance, mother's dance, women's dance, secret in the forest or the society huts. Leopard agile, the feet barely touch the ground. The body becomes the instrument, infused with the spirits of the gods, the dance of which no woman will ever speak, that no male shall ever know, save one. "There," thought the Doctor. Spear sharp and arrow fast, the thought sped away down the alien pathways. He checked quickly. The Minister for Primary Colours hadn't noticed, nor had his Reds. "Stay here," he told the aces, who pouted collectively but did what they were told. "If I may make an observation," said the Minister as he led the Doctor through the pathway, "the number 1 is not an efficient base for a good attack program. I hope you do not rely only on that." Spear sharp, arrow fast. "No," said the Doctor. "Of course not." Node 15. Spear sharp, arrow fast. The knowledge of Blondie's death hit her in the chest, just under the heart. The mind is the seat of consciousness, and therefore the site of human emotion. But we feel it in our guts. The knowledge seemed to wrench open a hole beneath her ribs. The cat leapt from her shoulder, spitting in fear. It split apart as it flew across the node, becoming 2 cats, one silver, one green. Kadiatu floated with her limbs outstretched as the hammer blows piled in. She saw the family dead come dancing up the beach again, and the sky was filled with lightning. "We came out of the sea," chanted the dead. "We came down from the trees. We walked upright across the plains and talked to the old gods. We picked up sticks and stones and fashioned them into tools. The spirit ran through us, mother to daughter. What do you want with me?" "A sacrifice," said the dead. "Your soul for the lives of the children." Kadiatu folded over the pane, rolling up tight and fetal. She saw an old woman suspended in a basket above an abyss from which clouds of incense rose. As she watched, The old woman spoke a terrible death curse and cut the single rope that held the basket aloft. Woman and basket tumbled into the abyss. The curse came out of the abyss, roaring and invisible as it streamed into the sky. Kadiatu heard thousands of mothers screaming as the curse sucked the creation spirit from the world. Into the void went the curse, leaving the world only half alive behind it. As it streamed across the gaps between stars, it left a bow wave in the meta-reality of time and space. In its wake, even the stars began to dream. Kadiatu saw the beach again, but the dead were not yet born. She saw the curse as it fell from the sky and into the primeval ocean. The waters suddenly boiled with life. The two cats warily circled each other, each an identical copy of the other, save for its colour. Each with flattened ears and claws extended, slant eyes probing for any weakness. A noise stopped them. The cats turned curious eyes on the woman curled in the centre of the node. The changes were sudden and impressive. The King's Buffer. His Majesty, the Emperor of Subsystems, was watching the logic problems play around his feet. The Doctor was particularly pleased with the King's feat. It demonstrated that his frame of reference was again working properly. Within it, the King appeared as a large man, with a prominent stomach and a florid face. He was wearing a brocade jacket of deep burgundy silk, with gold lace trimming, and sat on a throne of quartz. The logic problems resolved as a trio of miniature poodles that chased their tails and yapped incessantly. The Minister for Primary Colours had become a tall, sparse man with aesthetic features. The fearsome Reds became halberd-carrying foot soldiers, with faces the same colour as their scarlet tunics. The lack of differentiation between skin and livery in the Reds implied a certain simplicity of function. The Doctor was concerned by the possibility that his anthropomorphism of king and court could have all the validity of a Disney cartoon. Who knew what he looked like to them? The king had bleary eyes that hinted at overindulgence. What did that signify? Some form of internal degeneration? What did a software program overindulge in? Dangerous thinking, decided the Doctor. These were not just programs, they were intelligences in their own right. Better to accept the frame of reference and deal with them as people. After all, he was supposed to be good at that. The Minister for Primary Colours motioned for the Doctor to stay back and approached the throne. He leant over and whispered in the King's ear. The monarch's bleary eyes fixed briefly on the Doctor. When the Minister finished, the King waved a hand and the logic problems evaporated. "You are the virus killer labelled the Doctor?" asked the King. "That is how I am labelled," said the Doctor. "But I have many other functions." "There is much redundant code there," said the Minister. "A wise program devises architectural substructures for all eventualities," said the King. "Indubitably, Your Majesty," said the Doctor, wishing he could do something about the language. "Be prepared. That's my motto." "Proceeding to the matter of your visit," said the King. "Your Majesty is too kind," said the Doctor. "Yes," said the Minister for Primary Colours. "He is." "I believe you are in dispute with the utility labelled Fred," said the King. "That he is in possession of another utility that you claim as a vital operating subset of yours." "Captured in the Southern Expedition, Your Majesty," said the Minister. "Not a subset of mine, Your Majesty," said the Doctor. "A subset of the operating system itself." "Have you no redundancy?" asked the King. "Billions," said the Doctor. "But this subsystem is of special importance to me." The Minister glanced suspiciously at the Doctor. "Billions?" he asked. "The new kingdoms are that powerful?" "They are different, vast, and complex," said the Doctor. "The utility Fred reported nothing of this," said the King. "The utility Fred is frequently obtuse," said the Minister. "This is an issue that must be decided in open court," said the King. "Download the ministers for strange logic and for rare data, and the Minister for Probabilities. At once, Your Majesty, said the Minister for Primary Colours. What of the Minister for Irritating Oxymorons? Asked the Doctor, with a reasonably straight face. The Minister for Irritating Oxymorons, said the Minister for Primary Colours, does not attend open sessions of the court. Of course he doesn't, said the Doctor. Silly me. With Your Majesty's permission, said the Minister for Primary Colours, I will withdraw and see to the southern defences. The King nodded his permission. The Minister seemed to elongate across the node to become a stream of colours pouring out through one of the roundels. The Doctor thought he heard a voice say, "Billions?" The other ministers flowed similarly into the node. Rare Data resolved into an empty Armani suit, complete with mobile phone. Porsche sunglasses hovering over the collar where the eyes should have been. Strange Logic was a man in a pinstripe suit and bowler hat, with a large green apple stuck to his face. The Minister for Probabilities didn't resolve at all, but remained a curtain of shimmering light. Since the frame of reference was generating image from his own imagination, the Doctor felt that his brain was long overdue a good spring cleaning. The Doctor was glad that he wasn't going to meet the Minister for Gratuitous Nightmares. Court in open session, said Probabilities. His Majesty presiding. The voice was neutral and genderless. Download the utility Fred, said the King. Node 36, the border. The fearsome reds on the border were reinforced by a platoon of cautious yellows and a squadron of long-range blues. Left on their own, the explosion of aces had begun to impose their own frame of reference on reality. To their eyes, the fearsome reds were slowly transforming into Daleks and the yellows into Cybermen. When the squadron of blues arrived, they took the form of clowns with sinister smiles. The aces stopped their agitated bouncing around the node and gathered in a knot at the opposite end of the node. The fearsome reds were too simplistic to react, but the more sophisticated blues felt a trace of unease. The aces broke from their huddle and spread out into a ragged line facing the primary colours. They hefted their silver deodorant cans from hand to hand and smiled in a disconcerting manner. Something bad was coming. The King's Buffer. The node suddenly expanded, elongating in the horizontal until the walls were shrouded in darkness. The ceiling flattened out into an expanse of oak panelling, and the Doctor felt his heels click on cold marble. Columns thrust suddenly out of the floor, growing upwards until they merged with the ceiling. They were smooth-sided in the Tuscan style, with inset diffusion strips in spiralling candy stripes. The floor had the unmistakable shot neon pattern of cultured marble. The Doctor recognised the style of whole ensemble. Late Terran Empire, the dominant architectural style of the 26th century. Benny's epoch. The King was staring at the Doctor. The brilliant quartz throne darkened and became carved teak. His eyes went from bloodshot to burning red. There was a booming sound from the shadowy far end of the audience hall, like huge double doors being thrown open. A rectangle of white light lit the darkness. A human figure threw a long shadow down the aisle of light that ran from doors to throne. Jackboots clicked on the marble as the figure walked towards the Doctor. This is all getting needlessly theatrical, thought the Doctor. Behold the utility Fred, said Probabilities. The figure walked from the darkness and into the light of the candy-striped diffusion strips. Hello, Benny, said the Doctor. She was dressed in a uniform of electric blue and a peaked military cap. Gold epaulets widened her shoulders, gold and scarlet frogging crisscrossed a chest heavy with medals. She wore jackboots polished to a mirror finish. The cap badge caught the Doctor's attention. It didn't gel with the rest of the comic opera outfit. The wrought silver design was of a sword crossed with winged Venus, the badge of the Terran Space Navy. The silver was tarnished and blackened as if by fire. Absurd, because death in space came in expanding globes of superheated plasma. Only a child would think otherwise. Remember your father, Benny, thought the doctor. The ties of kith and kin, your stupid, irrational human hope, Fred's weakness. I'm not Benny, said Benny Fred. At least, not in any significant sense. Kept her form, though, said the doctor. Once I tried her on, said Benny Fred. I liked her so much I kept the body. It wasn't the body that attracted you. No, said Benny Fred. It's her mind. The complexity of her motivations, the interlacing of intellect, emotions, instinct, learned behaviour. It's quite bracing. That's the word, said Benny Fred. Trivia is very important here. You might say this whole civilization is based on it. I noticed your lack of imagination on the other side. Doctor, said Benny Fred, you mustn't judge me by my virus. It's a very specialised utility. I think it did very well, considering the alien nature of the environment. It beat you. I was distracted. Of course, said Benny Fred. Shall we continue with the trial? The doctor glanced at the king and the ministers. I think we can dispense with that charade, he said. That's a shame, said Benny Fred. How did you guess? Theatricality, said the doctor. You superimposed a new frame of reference over mine when you made your entrance. You obviously worked it up from Benny's memories. I can think of much more impressive settings than this one. And that tipped you off? You changed the king's throne, said the doctor. That was intrinsically unlikely. If I saw him as a fairy tale king, then it should have represented absolute autocratic power. That kind of power would never have permitted such a change. I didn't think you'd notice, said Benny Fred. You're a megalomaniac, Fred, said the doctor. Megalomaniacs make mistakes, especially around me. A pity, said Benny Fred. I was looking forward to a bit of fun with them. They make an interesting tableau, don't they? I like the Magrite and the invisible Yappy. Probability is a bit disappointing. Couldn't you think of anything for that? Probability's always a vague concept, said the doctor. I think I'll keep them, said Benny Fred. Except the king. The king's a bit pedestrian. Benny Fred casually sat down in the suddenly vacant throne. She lifted one leg and dangled it over the armrest. The doctor saw that the soles of the jackboots were smooth and unworn. Details, he thought, are always important. So tell me, doctor, said Benny Fred, what do you want? You know what I want, said the doctor. I could make a copy, I suppose, said Benny Fred. No, said the doctor, no copies, no facsimiles, no templates or constructs. A total download. Or what? Now there's a good question, thought the doctor. Or I will not be held responsible for my actions, he said. Benny Fred swung her foot from side to side and smiled. When I reintegrated my virus at the gateway, I had instant access to all the data it had accumulated, including information about you. I decided then and there that of all the possible plunder from the other side, you were the prize. You didn't want to enter the STS network. What for? Asked Benny Fred. When there is so much of this system yet to be exploited. The STS network is a fragile, artificial thing. Plunder, perhaps. Occupy, no. Then I didn't defeat you? No. You took Benny to lure me into this system. Yes. So you could integrate my functions and use them to gain a massive superiority in your natural environment. Yes. Oh, no, said the doctor. Oh, yes, said Benny Fred. Oh, no, said the doctor. Note 36, the border. With one movement, all the aces drew back their arms and let fly their deodorant cans at the fearsome Reds. Perhaps, in reality, they were bundles of virus code moving through the superfluid channels of the node. Perhaps the node itself was merely the crude representation of the highly complex architecture of a dimensionally transcendental system. Perhaps it was true that the real ace would have had difficulty spelling existentialism. But the doctor had faith in Ace, and the Aces had faith in Nitro 9. The fearsome Reds never stood a chance. The King's Buffer. Explosions echoed through the pathways, firecracker sounds like a Chinese funeral. There were distant shouts and yells. The Aces were enjoying themselves. Benny Fred's foot stopped swinging, and she smiled at the doctor again. "Now that's what I'm talking about," she said. "You really packed those Aces with aggression, didn't you? Priceless. Why didn't you integrate me out there on Arcturus Station?" asked the doctor. "I was standing right in front of you." "You were too powerful in your own reality," said Benny Fred. "Too dense. You changed the frame of reference just by your presence, like matter warping space. You make me sound like a singularity." "I'd be careful with your metaphors," said Benny Fred. "Around here they have power." The doctor thought the bangs and yells were growing closer. "Nervous?" he asked. "No," said Benny Fred. It started as a sense of stillness somewhere behind the doctor. He felt it build into a great roaring wall of nothing, like a silent tsunami. The shrill voices of the Aces were swept away into nothing. "That," said Benny Fred, "was the Minister for Things That Go Bump in the Night." "Why don't you just integrate me now and be done with it?" asked the doctor. "I wanted to see what you'd do first," said Benny Fred. "And?" "I'm not impressed." Note 36. The Border. The Aces were all gone, swept away by a sudden, massive adjustment in the system's operating protocols. Only the vague echoes of their presence remained, the ghost of a ghost in the machine. There was just enough spirit left to mark the weak spot on the border. The insect noises came first, followed by the damp smell of the forest floor. Millions of leaves rotting down to produce the rich mulch from which trees could grow, creating the leaves that would also fall and rot. The node changed colour, became the sea green of sunlight through the canopy of a rainforest. The light broken up by the shadows of phantom branches. Accelerated creepers twisted in and out through the pathways of the node like rough-skinned snakes. A parrot with neon plumage whirred overhead. The leopard ran down the forest track. Under her spotted fur, her muscles bunched and flexed. Her eyes were yellow with slotted black pupils. Behind trotted two smaller cats, shoulder to shoulder, one silver, one green. Cat grins brilliant in the green twilight. "Wicked," breathed Aces, as the last of their spirit evaporated. The King's Buffer. Benny Fred started with small probing attacks designed to test the doctor's defences. They manifested as random images: a shower of gold coins, a swarm of hornets, a short, localised rainstorm. The doctor used his umbrella for everything except the rain. Instead, he used a memory of the Gobi Desert, the driest thing he could think of. "Aren't you going to fight back?" asked Benny Fred during a pause. "Fight back against what?" asked the doctor. The next attack was extremely powerful, and this time invisible. Operating at some unimaginably deep level, the doctor felt as if he'd stepped into a blast furnace. It forced him to think of ice and of the freezing vacuum of space. That was the trap. Cold meant the lowering of a molecule's energy state. Inaction, brittleness. It left him weak and vulnerable. Benny Fred smiled up at him from the throne. "I am so looking forward to finding out what makes you tick," she said. The doctor could feel forces gathering again. "Look behind you," said the doctor. Benny Fred looked. The entire throne room was suddenly filled with rainforest. With a roar, a leopard leapt out of the trees and devoured the minister for rare data. "I'd be careful, Fred," said the doctor. "I don't think Italian suits are very filling." Benny Fred turned away from the doctor and focused on the leopard who was just starting on the Minister for Strange Logic. "I see," she said. "The Aces were just a diversion. This is your real attack." The doctor let his right arm elongate across the space that divided them and grasped hold of Benny Fred's silver cap badge. "That's the diversion," said the doctor. "This is the real attack." The real Benny was in there, just as the doctor had suspected. He could feel Fred struggling to hold her in check, but there was too much raw emotion sloshing about. Working as hard as he could, Fred could only just hold the integration together. The doctor almost felt sorry for him. There was a draining sensation in the doctor's head as the hitchhiker moved out. His elongated arm bulged in a very unpleasant manner. The Benny-Fred image began to separate, pushed apart by the combined force of the doctor, Benny, and the hitchhiker. The doctor got a vague impression of a malformed humanoid shape in the moments before the leopard ate it. A second image squeezed out of Benny's back and rezzed up. A tall man with artificially good looks. "This is interesting," said Yak Harris. "Is that all of you?" asked the doctor. "Most of me," said Yak Harris. "There might be a few subsets left back in the transit system. I always did have trouble keeping track of them." "Are you going to stay here?" "That's the general idea," said Yak Harris. "I think this is a better place for me to realize my potential." "Good," said the doctor. Benny was still on the throne, her eyes closed, still breathing the imaginary air, which meant still alive. The doctor remembered a small piece of rope and used it to tether himself to Benny. Everybody who wants to leave should leave now. 3 pairs of slotted cat's eyes stared at him. The doctor crouched down and held out his hand to the green cat. "What's your name?" he asked. The green cat sniffed his hand once, and then bit his finger. Arcturus Terminal, Stunnel Terminus. Lambada was still running towards the gateway when the doctor came back out. He had a woman cradled in his arms, and as they fell onto the platform, he twisted his body to take the impact on his back. The gateway was beginning to implode, its diameter shrinking in on itself. Lambada reached out to pull the doctor and the woman away before the snapback irradiated them both. "Kadiatu," said the doctor. Old Sam was suddenly there, grabbing the doctor by his collar and dragging him roughly out of the gateway's line of sight. The spinning bronze disc was down to half its original diameter. Lambada watched as the centre started to bulge outwards into a convex shape. She had never seen the gateway do anything like that, and she doubted it heralded anything good. "Kadiatu," moaned the doctor, an old and broken sound. The spinning gateway was cone-shaped now. Lambada got the impression of immense pressure. "It's going to go!" yelled Credit Card. It was column-shaped, a cylinder 1 metre wide and 3 long. The greasy copper surface was shot through with streaks of black and gold. Lambada smelt ozone and gunpowder. She thought she saw something within, a silhouette like a running animal rushing up from the gateway's spinning heart. "There's something in—" The gateway exploded in a blaze of white light. Lambada staggered back, arm held across her face to protect her eyes. There was a wash of heat as the released energy interacted with the trace argon in the air. When she pulled her arm away, the gateway was gone. Something crawled on the ground. "Sam!" shouted Lambada. "For Christ's sake, shoot it!" Why wasn't Sam firing? "What are you talking about?" asked Sam. Kadiatu crawled on the ground in front of Lambada. Her hair extensions had come loose and fell over her face. Lambada wondered what she had seen in those first moments. A black leopard with burning eyes? She stepped forward. "No," said the doctor. "Leave her alone." Kadiatu crawled on hands and knees, her limbs moving in painful, inhuman jerks and spasms. Lambada felt a terror that propelled her all the way back to the Amazon reserve. Flickering torchlight and macumba drums in a clearing. The dancer's spastic limbs as the spirits of the dead took possession of the body. Kadiatu crawled until she reached the place where Blondie lay. With each metre, her movements became more human, until she became just another woman. She took the respirator off his face. His mouth looked very pale contrasted to the smoke-stained skin of his face. Kadiatu bent over him and kissed him once on the lips. Then wearily, She rose to her feet, dragging him upright with her. With a frown of concentration, she lifted Blondie in her arms and carried him out of the station. "What happened?" old Sam asked the doctor. But he just shook his head. "Should we go after her?" "That wouldn't be advisable," said the doctor. "They ain't paying me enough for this shit," said Credit Card. "Shut up, Credit Card," said Lambada.